Starting a composing career today is nothing like it was 20, 10, or even 5 years ago. And if I had to do it all over again in 2026, I'd skip a ton of the things I see composers still wasting their time on. So in today's video, I'm going to walk you through the 7 steps I'd take right now to get commissioned, performed, and recognized without losing years chasing the wrong things. So let's begin with our first step, the one that will make the biggest difference in how often your music actually gets performed. Now, many composers feel like they need permission or the perfect idea before they start writing music. But waiting around won't help you improve. See, most people think inspiration has to strike first, but it's really the other way around. Fire, for example, doesn't start with heat. It starts with friction. You have to strike something to make it start burning. So the first thing I'd recommend is just start composing. It doesn't have to be great. It's okay if nobody hears it just yet. At this early stage, what matters most is building the habit and learning to trust yourself. And while they do have their use cases, reading theory books or orchestration textbooks does not replace having quiet, focused time to explore your own musical ideas, no matter how unsure you feel initially about them. Prioritize these precious pockets of composing time. Even starting with just 30 to 45 minutes a day makes a huge difference over time. Great, so now that you've committed to composing about 30 to 45 minutes a day, the next question becomes, what should you be doing during that time? Now, a lot of composers immediately want to start with orchestral music, and I completely understand why. Writing for orchestra is incredibly exhilarating. A couple years back, I wrote for the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and right now I'm the composer in residence for the California Symphony. Now, these experiences, alongside all the other orchestral performances I've had, are of course very meaningful to me. But I want to share with you something most composers are not told early on. Writing for orchestra takes a very long time. Not just the actual composing, by the way, but the revision process, the engraving, and the sheer amount of detail that's required in that kind of work. One orchestral piece can take months, if not years, of focused work, and sometimes it's only performed once or even never at all. But if you start instead with smaller pieces, you can finish many more works in that same span of time. And each finished piece you write is a chance to learn, to collaborate, and to grow as a composer. So if I were starting fresh in 2026, I would begin with solo pieces written on a single staff. Instruments like the flute, violin, trumpet, clarinet. The specific instrument really doesn't matter actually that much at this stage. What matters is that you're learning how to express your own musical ideas clearly and directly through these instruments. And from there, I would expand gradually, solo to duo, duo to trio, trio to quartet, then to larger chamber ensembles, and then eventually to the orchestra. And it's worth considering, by the way, that many of the most enduring pieces in history are solo pieces. Think about Bach's cello suites, Paganini's caprices for the violin, Berlioz' sequenze for all the various instruments and voice. Even my own solo trumpet work was just premiered alongside Berlioz' sequenze for trumpet just a few weeks ago. So even though I'm writing orchestral commissions, I still find it extremely important to be writing these solo and smaller pieces in between these larger commissions to keep my chops up and to keep my relationships with individual performers alive. And by the way, these solo works are not just simply warm-ups for something grander that you'll write later on. They are legitimate pieces that reveal your musical identity and sharpen your ear. They'll help you develop your ability to write line, shape, and form in a very focused way. And the best part is that starting with smaller forces will enable you to finish more pieces each year, have more opportunities for live performance, and refine your musical voice through repetition and feedback. And when the time comes to write for orchestra, the process will feel clear and manageable because you will have already built the craft and confidence needed for that scale of writing. You'll find that when you've written for flute, adding piano is relatively straightforward. When you have written trios and quartets, an orchestra no longer feels out of reach. This is how your orchestral music is written in a way that leads to real performances. You grow into it piece by piece, not all at once. Now, step 3 tackles one of the biggest challenges composers face today, and it's the key to improving much faster than you would on your own. And it works like this. If you're building a career as a concert composer in 2026, isolation can be especially brutal. It eats away at your confidence, separates you from the broader musical community, and makes you feel like you're writing in a vacuum. So if I were starting fresh in 2026, I'd make it a priority to actively connect with other composers and musicians right from the start. I'd look for local communities or groups where people share my passion for concert music. You can easily do this, by the way, by attending small concerts, especially concerts with around 20 people in the audience and just a few performers, where conversations with musicians happen naturally. Or find free recitals hosted by your local university music department. The key really is to start somewhere, no matter how small, and let your community grow from there. And here's the truth, you don't improve in isolation. Rather, you'll grow faster, gain confidence, and become a stronger composer when you're regularly interacting with people who care about music as deeply as you do. After all, these connections help you find your blind spots, refine your skills, and keep you inspired and motivated along your composing journey. Now, step 4 is one that most composers skip, even though it is often the thing that makes the biggest difference in how far their music actually goes. See, a lot of composers wait until a piece is finished before bringing anyone else into the process. But by then, it's usually too late to make meaningful changes without questioning everything. Instead, seek feedback from someone you trust while you are still writing, right in the middle of your creative process. Because when you do this, your mind stays sharp and aware of exactly why you are making each musical decision. You'll be able to clearly explain the choices to the person giving feedback, and that conversation will often give you greater clarity about your own process and stylistic tendencies. And here's something a bit vulnerable about myself that I want to share with you. I have not personally taken a private composition lesson since 2019, which is more than 5 years ago now. But I still make it a point to seek feedback on my music regularly. Sometimes it's from my composer friends who know my work well. Sometimes it's from musicians and conductors I collaborate with. And probably most often it's from my spouse, who I constantly ask to come down here and check my work. Now, the point that I'm trying to make here is that I'm not doing any of this alone, and I wouldn't want to either. And even if you're getting regular feedback, that doesn't mean you have to take every suggestion that someone gives you. Because even feedback you disagree with can spark new ideas or open up a direction you would not have discovered on your own. The crucial thing is that this ongoing dialogue helps you discover and refine your personal musical voice. And that unique voice is what makes musicians excited to perform your work live. Now, this next step changed everything for many of my own students. And after embracing it, they stopped wasting their time trying to find their artistic voice and instead started developing it through the music they actually love. That shift alone led to real results, things like festival acceptances, performances, and commissions that finally felt authentic to them. Because developing a clear, personal voice is one of the biggest keys to becoming a composer whose work gets performed and commissioned regularly. And if you want to work out this step on your own, I've created a free worksheet that you can download in the description below. So here's your main takeaway. Don't try to study every major composer in the canon. That completist mindset only slows you down and dilutes your creative energy. Instead, study the music that truly excites you, even if no one else around you seems to understand why. Whether it's music from the late Renaissance, the Second Viennese School, or the Fluxus movement, it really doesn't matter. Build a personal library of scores and recordings that simply light you up, and then dive deep into understanding exactly why they resonate with you. Let me give you an example of this in action. One of my students' biggest musical heroes is Charles Ives, one of the true titans of early 20th century American music. But when I asked why he wasn't incorporating Ives' mannerisms into his own work, he admitted he'd never thought to actually use the same techniques that Ives used. The thought simply hadn't occurred to him, even though he adored the music. Now, after I encouraged him to go down the Ives rabbit hole, to really embrace that influence and identify what he loved about it, whether it was the harmony, the rhythm, or the spirit behind it, his writing changed completely. And just a few months later, his new music, now infused with those influences, was being premiered in his hometown of Boston, with more performances already underway. So the bottom line is this: don't shy away from what inspires you. Lean into it. Your authentic voice is your greatest asset as a composer and the surest path to getting your music performed and commissioned. Step 6 is going to help you move past imposter syndrome by simplifying your actual writing process. And even in 2026, with all the amazing tech, AI tools, and powerful notation software available, I still strongly recommend starting your compositions with pencil and paper. Now, to be clear, writing on paper first does not mean you have to write everything purely from imagination. You should absolutely use the piano, your voice, your instrument, anything that helps you hear the ideas as you go. After all, that's what composers like Beethoven and Stravinsky have always done. They were not simply pulling music out of thin air. They were listening, testing, and shaping the music as they wrote. Now, the key is this: when you write by hand, the music forms through your ear, your hand, and your physical sense of gesture. You build muscle memory for the musical shapes that feel right to you. You get to feel the music as it takes form instead of just looking at notes on a screen, which is wholly uninspiring if you ask me. Now, technology and software are still really important. We're just simply using them at the right stage. For example, when you have a section, a sketch, or a passage that feels formed, then you bring it into your computer. And that's where playback is most useful. Playback is not there to guide the writing measure by measure. Playback is there to help you hear the pacing and shape of the larger sections so you can refine structure without getting influenced by the small details too early on in the process. So start on paper first. Use your piano or electronic keyboard or any other instrument as much as you need. Then move to the computer once something is ready to be shaped at a broader scale. You'll find that this simple habit gives you clarity, a deeper connection to your own musical language, and a much more confident composing process. And finally, step 7, and really for all this to work, this whole process is supposed to be my favorite F word, which is, you guessed it, fun. And yes, building these habits and practices takes time and effort. But at the end of the day, creating concert music that you truly believe in, music that gets performed, commissioned, and recognized is one of the most rewarding things that you can do as a composer. And here's probably the most important idea in this entire video. If composing ever stops being fun, that's your signal that something's off track. So if you want to learn my entire framework for how I keep composing fun, engaging, and inspiring, you can watch my entire 5-hour composition masterclass right over here. I'll see you then.